Hello everyone. Fire Emblem Three Houses is one of my favorite games, if not my favorite game of all time. And one of my favorite aspects of Three Houses is the 4 different routes. It's always nice to choose which way you want Photon to go and who you'll side with, and each of the routes are very good. But they all aren't equal when it comes to their quality, which leads me to the topic of today's video. I will rank these routes based on how unique and fun the battles are, how strong the story is, how strong the main character, whether it be Edelgard, Dimitri, Freya, or Claude, is implemented to the story and how strong their arcs are, and how strong and important the side characters are to the story. If you liked the video here today, remember to like and subscribe for more Zelda and Fire Emblem content in the future. And now, here is the ranking of the 4 routes in Fire Emblem Three Houses. My least favorite route in Three Houses is, unsurprisingly, Silver Snow. And to start out with the battles, it doesn't go great. Basically, every story battle in Silver Snow is completely copied from Verdant Wind. Every chapter, except for the final battle against Rhea. Which the battle being against Rhea is another flaw I'll get to later, but the actual chapter itself is pretty fun. If you go the way the game wants you to go, you will go down to step on a tile that will stop dragons respawning that are helping protect Rhea. Then you'll go up, kill all the rest of the dragons, and then it's finally against Rhea, which is a very challenging fight. And I mean challenging, because on my first run of Silver Snow, the final boss fight took me about 50 turns, which is a lot for Fire Emblem chapters. My favorite part of the final battle though is the alternative way. You could go across the bridge and fight Rhea one-on-one, but that would require you to do it in one turn. As at the beginning of every chapter, the dragons heal Rhea up to her full health. But since this is the only unique chapter in a sea of recycled chapters, I'm not too keen on the battles in Silver Snow. The supporting cast of Silver Snow is a little mixed for me as well. On the one hand, I really like the Black Eagles, as they are personally my favorite house, but they're kinda afterthoughts in Silver Snow. Since you don't side with Edelgard, you lose Edelgard and Hubert, and the rest of the Black Eagles just kinda feel like extras. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Black Eagles should have left during Silver Snow, as it would be kinda stupid if you leveled up the Black Eagles for all of Part 1 and then they just suddenly left you. Now, for the Church of Sero side of things, since you side with Rhea, you get Sedith, Flayn, Catherine, and Cyril as units. And that would be nice if all 4 of these characters weren't playable in any other route. But, outside of Crimson Flower, all 4 of these characters are playable in every single route. But for the most part, I like the side characters and how they are used, even though I think the Black Eagle should have been more of a focus. Moving on to the main character of this route herself, Rhea. And I do not think she is used very well here. Rhea is abducted at the end of White Clouds, and I get why they did this, because Byleth needs to know about his past, and Rhea is basically the only one that can tell him. But that literally is the same motivation for finding Rhea with Verdant Wind, and to a lesser extent, Azure Moon. Rhea is, without a doubt, underutilized in Silver Snow, as she is absent for 3/4 of it, not a playable character, and she just comes in at the end to be the final boss. And with the other 3 routes, it's obviously an Edelgard route, or a Dimitri route, or a Claude route, but this route you could argue it's about Sedith or Byleth rather than Rhea, who you chose to side with. Overall, if Rhea was in the story more, I'd probably like Silver Snow more than I do. Finally, the story of Silver Snow is probably its best aspect, although if that's the case, it's not by much. Starting with the things that I like, the dynamic between Byleth and Edelgard in this route is very well done. Since Byleth and Edelgard grew closer in White Clouds, having to go fight against her is a really interesting thing, and it makes the cutscene when you finally beat Edelgard in the Adressian throne room a real punch in the gut. One story scene I want to bring up is right after the Bridge of Myrddin, when you hear about the Gronder Field battle, and then you hear that Dimitri died and Claude basically ran away. And then, literally the scene after that, you see Dimitri, then he gives you some mysterious dialogue and then disappears. It's really bizarre and unexplained, but I think that's my favorite part about it, because he might just be a ghost. Moving on to the negatives, however, I don't really like the pacing of this route, as it feels very drawn out, but Silver Snow isn't the only route with pacing issues, as you'll probably see later. Another issue I have with it is that after every ALL chapter, you get a non-playable ally. In Azure Moon, it was Rodrigue, and in Verdant Wind, it was Judith. But in Silver Snow, it's just Judith again. I would have preferred someone related to the Adressian Empire or the Church of Seros to be the non-playable ally, but I think Judith is fine as is. Another issue I have with it is the final battle. The final battle is very fun as a map, but story-wise, it's kinda stupid. You fight Rhea, which doesn't even make sense, since you literally choose to side with Rhea rather than Edelgard. I would have preferred you fighting Edelgard for a final boss, or even Nemesis, but in my eyes, Rhea should definitely not have been the final boss of Silver Snow. To summarize, I think Silver Snow is a fine route, but it's definitely not better than the other ones on this list. Verdant Wind is barely better than Silver Snow in my opinion. And to start with the battles are largely the same in every chapter except the final chapter and the Gronder Field map. The Gronder Field battle, while also in Azure Moon, I don't feel as bad for its inclusion because it makes sense since it's a three-way battle. I really like the Gronder Field map in White Clouds, so I think the Gronder Field map in Part 2 is very fun. I might like the Gronder Field in Part 2 more, because you don't have to wipe out everyone, so it goes quicker. And the final battle against Nemesis is pretty fun too. You start out by going to kill the 10 elites, and then you can finally get rid of Nemesis' shield, and you get rid of the poison that damages you every turn. I like the difficulty of the final map as well. It's not super easy, but it's definitely not a cakewalk either. But even though the two chapters I talked about were very fun, every other chapter is a repeat of either Silver Snow or Azure Moon. So again, the battles in Verdant Wind aren't the best, in terms of their originality at least. But even still, I think Verdant Wind's battles are a step up from Silver Snow's. Now moving on to the characters of Verdant Wind. And I like the Golden Deer for the most part. They're not necessarily my favorite house in Three Houses, but I think they do a pretty good job in Verdant Wind. With the characters themselves, I like about half of them a lot. The other half, I'm not really too fond of. Like again, they do a good job in Verdant Wind helping out the plot, but some of the characters aren't really that interesting. Like for example, Raphael isn't that interesting, you've gotta admit. But unlike Silver Snow, none of the characters here really feel forced to be in. Even Seth and Flame, because they're just kinda helping out from the side, they don't end up pushing the main house to the side, like with Silver Snow. And similar to the battles, Verdant Wind takes a step up from Silver Snow in its quality. Now I admit, I think the Golden Deer and Seth and Flame could have played a little bit bigger of a part in the story, but I think it's fine as is. Moving on to the main character of this route, Claude. And well, he was better than Rhea. Verdant Wind was my last route in my first playthroughs, and I got really excited because Claude was very mysterious as a character, so I was excited to get to know his backstory. And it was alright. You do learn about Claude's backstory and how he was the Prince of Almyra, but you don't really learn that much more about him, which I guess is part of his character, but still, I would have preferred to learn a little bit more. What I mean is, I read somewhere that Claude was gonna have a reveal where Claude wasn't actually Claude's real name, but it ended up getting cut, and something like that would have made Claude's character and his role in Verdant Wind more substantial to me. And all that leaves is a character that is already so good, he doesn't really need to have a character arc, which is something that made the number 1 and 2 routes on this list so good. Verdant Wind's story also has a lot of missed potential. But before we get to that, I guess we can start with the positives. It does keep to Claude's character as you get to learn more about the past of Fodlan, and you do get to meet characters close to Claude like Judith and his father, so I think that is well done. The biggest positive I can get Verdant Wind's story is that that's the one I'd recommend for any player that's new to the game to play first. Since you're not playing a Edelgard or Dimitri route, you're less likely to favor one or the other and can view the game at least somewhat neutrally. And that's all the positives I can get it. Now on to the missed potential. First of all, the whole thing with Edelgard is the exact same as Silver Snow. Whereas in Silver Snow it works well because Edelgard and Byleth were very close in White Clouds, it makes absolutely no sense because Edelgard keeps calling Byleth my teacher, even though Byleth was never Edelgard's professor in this route. The whole dynamic and conflict makes absolutely no sense, so it just feels recycled. And like I said earlier, Claude's backstory isn't as developed as I wanted it to, and developing Claude a little bit more would have made a way better route than it is right now. Also, Nemesis as the final boss, it's a fun chapter, but it's definitely not the best choice for Claude's final boss. One, it's kinda weird how in Silver Snow, Rhea is in the same position as she is in Verdant Wind, but comes back and turns into a dragon and becomes the final boss, but doesn't here. And Nemesis breaks free in this route, but not in Silver Snow? Now I'm not exactly sure who the best boss for Claude's route would have been, but it definitely should not have been Nemesis. For the entire route, you're basically just doing Silver Snow with the Golden Deer. I would have preferred like you going to places in Almyra and stuff other than the chapters we got. And overall, the story could have been much better, like it had a lot of potential, but I think it just missed that mark. But I think Verdant Wind is still a better route than Silver Snow, for being slightly better in most of the aspects I brought up, and for the main character actually being there. But really, Verdant Wind and Silver Snow could go either way. Azure Moon is the runner-up on this list, and in my opinion, a massive improvement over Verdant Wind. Especially in the battles, as Azure Moon has way more unique battles than Verdant Wind and Silver Snow. The ones it does reuse make sense, especially the Grunder Field map, since it's a battle between the three houses. One of the unique battles in Azure Moon is the Take Back Ferdiad chapter. It is a very funny, unique chapter with a pretty tough boss, and it does a great job of progressing the story. But by far my favorite battle in Azure Moon is the final one against Edelgard. And compared to the other bosses in Three Houses, the one in Azure Moon is definitely the hardest. And I mean that in the best way possible because this map is extremely fun. There's 3 separate ways you can go, either right, up, or left, and either way, you're going to have a lot of challenges. There's a lot of enemies on this map, and the final boss is a very tough challenge. And even outside of the final boss, maps like Fort Mercius give a new take on a already existing chapter in the other routes. And overall, I like the battle maps in Azure Moon. They might use a lot of the same chapters in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow, but overall, I think it's unique enough to stand apart. Moving on to the characters, and yet again, an improvement over Verdant Wind. And the thing I like the most about how the Blue Lions were involved in the main plot of Azure Moon was that they helped Dimitri go through his character growth midway through Part 2. Each of the members of the Blue Lions and the other Church of Sirius members, that they each helped Dimitri get over his grief for what happened in the past. Especially Felix, Gilbert, Dedu, and Byleth, as they all helped Dimitri to realize that he did not need to carry the burdens of the deceased on his shoulders. And I really like how the Blue Lions were used here. They used just enough to help Dimitri get over his past, but not too much where they end up taking over the story. Moving on to the main character of Azure Moon, Dimitri. And by far, Dimitri has the best character arc out of any character in this game. He starts out the game as a guy who's only looking for revenge for the tragedy of Duscur, to an insane madman when he discovers that Edelgard was the Flame Emperor. And then he finally realizes he doesn't need the souls of the dead to control him. And then he tries his best to make up for his actions by saving the people of Fargus. Dimitri's character arc is so good, and it's not matched by any other main character in the game. Not Rhea, not Claude, not even Edelgard. Dimitri is really awesome as a character in Azure Moon, and I honestly really don't have anything bad to say about it. He's done really well here. Moving on to the story, and yep, Azure Moon has a really good story, which is probably equal, if not better, than the number 1 on this list. Even aside from Dimitri's character development, there are still a lot of strong moments here. First of all, Edelgard is a great villain in Azure Moon because of her personal connection to Dimitri instead of forcing it on Byleth like in Verdant Wind. The Death Knight is a very good villain here too because of his connection to Mercedes, a member of the Blue Lions. The thing I like the most is that you learn so much good backstory throughout the entire route. It creates a very good mystery, and it feeds information out very well, piece by piece. Azure Moon also had some great individual moments as well, for example, Rodrigue's death and the meeting between Dimitri and Edelgard, which not only set up the final boss nicely, it also had some nice payoff with an earlier scene where we learn that Dimitri and Edelgard were childhood friends. And then Dimitri calls Edelgard Elle, and then, again, we get a nice payoff with Edelgard finally learning that she knew Dimitri once. And the final boss is great too because you get to see Edelgard when she's most desperate and see what she can become, which is a very nice contrast to Crimson Flower because almost the opposite occurs, because Edelgard has to stop Dimitri, who is full of hatred. I like the ending cutscene a lot after you beat Edelgard because it does a great job of telling a story without using much words. Now, moving on to the negatives, there are a few things I wasn't too fond of in Azure Moon. The pacing in Azure Moon is a little bit slow, but it's not as bad as Verdant Wind or Silver Snow. The big thing I don't like about Azure Moon's story is the lack of a fight against those who slither in the dark, because those who slither in the dark started the tragedy of Duscur, and the tragedy of Duscur is a big part of Dimitri's character, you'd think at some point he'd want to go fight them. But no, at best, he gets to investigate them after the game's over if you pair him up with Happy. I'm also a little iffy on how Byleth helps Dimitri get over his anguish of the past, but overall, Azure Moon has one of, if not the best story in Fire Emblem Three Houses. Crimson Flower barely beats Azure Moon and gets number 1 on this list. But although I feel that Azure Moon and Crimson Flower are very close in their quality, I feel like their battles aren't close at all. First of all, they have the most unique battles out of any of the other routes. What I mean is, Silver Snow has one unique route that's not in any other route, and that is the final battle against Rhea. Verdant Wind, same story, only the final battle against Nemesis is a unique chapter. Azure Moon is a bit better in this regard, having 2 unique chapters, the Take Back Ferdiad and the final battle against Edelgard, and it has 1 map that is in the other routes, but from a different angle. But Crimson Flower blows the other routes out of the water. To my count, Crimson Flower has 3 unique maps not in any other route, the Arya Node chapter, the final battle against Rhea, and the Tailtean Plains chapter. And it has 3 maps that are used in other routes, but from a different positioning. And the 3 unique maps that are present in Crimson Flower are some of my favorite in the game. The Arya Node chapter is a very fun map because you get to go around the entire fortress fighting some of your former classmates and Cornelia. It's a very climactic fight, especially if you have characters like Felix or Sylvain that you recruited. The final fight against Rhea is also very fun. It's on the same map as the Take Back Ferdiad chapter in Azure Moon, but since everything's on fire, it creates a new challenge. And the Tailtean Plains chapter that happens just before the final boss is 10 times more climactic than the Arya Node chapter, and 10 times more fun because you have more enemies, and you have to stop enemies before they turn into demonic beasts. And that creates one of my favorite battles in the entire game. The only thing I would have liked for Crimson Flower's battles is a Crimson Flower version of the Battle at Gronder, but this route definitely works without it. As we move on to the characters are used really well here. Personally, they're my favorite house. One reason is that it's made apparent in Crimson Flower's plot that Edelgard would have never met her goal weren't it for her friends, the Black Eagles and Byleth. The Black Eagles have tremendously good support conversations with each other that help enrich the plot, like the one you're seeing on screen now with Ferdinand and Dorothea, and Caspar and Petra. And overall, I really don't have that much negatives with how the Black Eagles are using Crimson Flower. They're perfectly used in moderation like Azure Moon, but they don't just feel like they're just kind of there, like in Silver Snow. Moving on to the main character in Crimson Flower, Edelgard. I like her involvement in Crimson Flower for about the same reasons I like Dimitri's involvement in Azure Moon. Just like Dimitri, her route has a very great story focus on her, and because of that, Edelgard goes through critical character development that helps the story. Because you realize if the main character, Byleth, didn't help Edelgard realize to let her friends in, that means she would never win and get her goal. I know I'm not really counting the support conversations when I'm reviewing the main character section of this route, but in this case it really helps out Edelgard's character, because about a third of her character development, at least to me, is in her support conversation with Byleth, which I both like and dislike at the same time. I like it because you need to have a C+ level of support with Edelgard to even qualify to get into Crimson Flower, so it would make sense that a lot of her character development is here. But on the flip side, that's less character development that Edelgard could go through in the main story, and if your support level with Edelgard wasn't super high, you wouldn't be able to see all that character development. Overall, Edelgard is really well done here. I wouldn't say I like her involvement as much as I like Dimitri's involvement, but I think she does a really good job either way. Now moving on to the final factor, the story. And fitting for the #1 spot in this list, the story of Crimson Flower is really good. Like I said in the last section, the great story focus on Edelgard is a big reason why Crimson Flower's story works so well. Probably my favorite part of Crimson Flower is the villain, Rhea. Rhea works well as a villain for a multitude of reasons. One of that being the fights against your former classmates are even more dignified in this route since you decided to fight against Rhea instead of against Edelgard. Another reason being is that the voice actor for Rhea did a really great job of making Rhea sound menacing and evil in this route. One of the menacing and evil moments occurs after the second battle of Garreg Mach if you did not spare Sedith and Flayn. Rhea goes absolutely insane after hearing the news of Sedith and Flayn, and vows to destroy Edelgard and Byleth. That scene is probably one of the most memorable scenes in Three Houses for me, because of how well voice acted it in and how I was not expecting it going into it. Obviously, there are other examples of this, but I really wanted to highlight this one because it's by far my favorite. Now, another aspect I like about Crimson Flower is the shortened story length. Now, I get that some of you might not have liked this, since it might have made this route feel unfinished compared to the other 3, but I beg to differ. I think this route has a better pacing because of its short length compared to the other 3 routes that have not the best pacing. Now, this way, you don't have to go through all the extra stuff, like getting reinforcements in ALL or something like that. The last little extra thing I want to bring up here is that the final boss against Rhea is very climactic here because the whole city's burning and Rhea finally transformed into a dragon, and it really makes you feel like it's a hard-won fight. Overall, Crimson Flower is a really amazing route. It's not perfect, as it is missing things like a showdown against the Agarthans, but even without that, it is definitely deserving of the #1 spot on this list. Thank you so much for watching this video. Although I've been a bit negative on Fire Emblem Three Houses routes, I do like all of them, and I feel like they're very good for what they are, even with their flaws. With Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes coming out next Friday, I wanted to make this video to reflect on Fire Emblem Three Houses routes and see what they did right and wrong. And I will say this, I've been playing through the demo of Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, and it's looking very promising. No spoilers here, but I feel like it could correct some of the route issues that Crimson Flower, Verdant Wind, and Azure Moon might have had. And that brings me to the topic of next month's video. After the game comes out and I've played through one of the routes, I will post a spoiler-free review of the game to see if I liked it or not. Again, I really hope you liked the video, and I'll see you all next time.